Dear colleagues, dear friends of the Macau Rich Institute and the University of St. Joseph, I would very warmly welcome you to today's forum. And I greet also especially those online from a broad range of cities. Of course, we would wish that you are here, but we are also very happy through to these wonders of the modern technique to reach out to you who are now in Beijing, in Italy, Florence. So it's a great chance and for us really a great honor and joy to welcome Professor Dr. Francesco Vossilla among us, who is a dear friend of our Rich Institute. Some of you will well remember the talk on Giuseppe Castiglione. So he's member of the Association of the Studi di Giuseppe Castiglione. So we also warmly welcome our dear rector, Reverend Stephen Morgan, always supporting us strongly. No, it's 1 minute is within the academic range. And and our focus is on diplomacy and art along the Silk Road. So, and it's also part of our effort to reach out to many more people who ask themselves what they do along the Silk Road, or we now say along the Belt and Road Initiative. And we do this not just looking into the past, the glorious past, but we want to learn also how we can better dialogue with China. So therefore we feel particularly touched that some of our friends also from China and Beijing join us tonight. You know, I don't have to underline that Professor Francesco Vossilla has been lecturing all over the world, also in China, lately in Xi'an, Chiaotong University. And his talk today is focused on the research which is sponsored by the Rich Institute, namely on these missionaries along the Silk Road. And I think you may appreciate our ecumenic outlook. We are not just focused on the Jesuit missionaries. Some of our Dominican friends will be relieved to finally hear about the Vittorio Ricci, not only the Matteo Ricci, and of course also we will hear about very important Franciscan missionaries. Now, our plan is like this. We have a talk of about 45 minutes, and I would warmly welcome our audience online. Write your questions to the chat room. You will find on the bottom, you have on the bottom the chat room where you can ask questions, and then with the help of our dear Father Jaroslav Durai and my colleagues here, Brian and Barry, we will prioritize your questions. So this is the plan. So after the talk, we will of course give you who make an effort to be here first, of course, the chance to ask question, and then we will then try to also honor all the questions you write in the chat room. So now, again, very warmly, mille grazie to Florence. We feel extremely happy that you are with us. Of course, we know you want very much to be with us, but at least now we appreciate having such a wide audience to honor your research. Thank you very much, and give him a big hand.
It's me to thank you, and because I don't want to go over too much with time, I immediately would share the screen with you and start the reading to be very, try to be a little more concise. I would read from a text that I have here in front of me. I thank you for the opportunity to interface with you as we listen daily to contrasting words of trust and fear, hostility and friendship. It is meaningful for me to recognize some of your friendly voices. Hence, I see you as if you were entering my home, and I salute you with the words of Confucius. To have friends coming from distant places, is that not a joy? For our conversation, I do not claim to offer you novelties. Rather, I will humbly remind us a few examples of cultural mediation and diplomacy carried out in China by missionaries. Beyond determined historical conditions, the ventures of these men might be of teaching during this alienating time, since they became friends among friends on the Chinese screen. Mine is a lay perspective, however, in the face of present-day fear for the other, being this worrisome stranger from the West or the East, I wonder if looking back at history might help us today to expose false needs of estrangement and, on the contrary, to overcome forestalled misunderstanding, at least at our level. In the last decades, scholars opened specific avenues for research to illuminate the history of Christianity in China and its legion of international and Chinese protagonists. According to Father José Rodriguez Carballo, former general of the Friars Minor, Giovanni da Montecorvino, Odorico da Pordenone, and other Franciscans operated in UN China as ambassadors of peace and ambassadors of the faith. The same was true for lesser known men and women who belonged to several religious orders and labor in various regions of China in different historical periods. Today, to refresh historical awareness might help us to buttress the last 20 years of mutual recognition and friendship. About 7 years ago, I embarked on the topic of Italian Jesuit artists in China as I was teaching for American students at Gonzaga University in Florence, Italy. I was ignorant, although already gray of hair. I also wanted to build a stronger bond with my wife, Jian Janine, who is leading me into Chinese culture. This was happening as I was befriending some Jesuit priests and scholars. They awakened me and they gave me testimony regarding how projects might arise at the intersections of variant fields with which we feel intimate. I am still ignorant, my hair is grayer. That is why I cherish this occasion to conjoin with you. To make you understand my sentiment, examining myself as well as looking at the visual testimonies of the Chinese mission, I would like to quote a poem Gu Wenyuan wrote to the Chinese artist and Jesuit priest Wu Li on 1691. Gu Wenyuan says, "We are dull and busy with our carnal life against conscience, but you, Mr. Wu Mo-jin, can be bright enough to avoid it. Having met those wise men, you were taught the essence of Western learning. Little do you regret for your old age and fleeting times. As the priest of Jardin, you receive a salary from the West, and you write Western letters brilliantly. You teach your students to abide by the Bible, and you feel ashamed if they fail to follow. No Buddhist or Taoist ever visit your place. Caring and encouraging, you have now just passed your 60th year. In my admiring eyes, you are such a noble and outstanding person. Looking at ourselves, we seem too senseless to be acquainted with you. When you cross the Liu River to come by in a boat, please bring over the book of the prophet to awaken me. So in my dream, I will make a journey to Europe, which would open up a world deep in my heart. Gu Wenyan never converted, but he was sharing Wu Li's dream to make a transformative journey to Europe, to the center of Christianity. Moreover, in 1670, examining his visual philosophy, Wu Li wrote, quote, "Human affairs, large or small, are like a dream. Is not a painting also a dream? What I dream of are mountains, streams, grass, and trees, and I dream about my brush and ink, and that is all." End of quote. The life is a dream, is like a dream, is a traditional Chinese idea. Peculiar is that painting is also a dream. In fact, according to the bright research of Ling Xiaoping, Wu Lin's lines were influenced by two friends, the Chinese Catholic scientist and high official Li Jijiao and Father Francesco Sambiase, S.J., whose diplomatic efforts I will mention later. We shall recall how Jiading and Songjiang were centers of significant Catholic communities near Shanghai. Candida Xu, granddaughter of Paolo Xu Guangxi, was living in Songjiang, a house furnished with European scientific curiosities, engravings, and oil paintings, became an enculturation center as she shared books on Western religion, science, philosophy, and the visual arts. Possibly, Wu Li met her as he was a friend of Father Francois de Rougemont, S.J., who knew her. Since 1621, Francesco Sambiase had moved to Jiading at the invitation of the famous Catholic mathematician and expert of military science, Ignazio Sun, one of the most important followers of Paolo Xu Guangxi. Based in Jiading, Father Sambiase wrote his main work in classical Chinese, The Humble Consideration on the Soul, printed in 1624 and edited by Ignazio Sun himself. In 1629, the aforementioned Li Jijiao published a book titled Response to Questions on Sleep and Painting, collecting two Aristotelian essays written in the form of a dialogue by Francesco Sambiase. They explain how painted portraits of human can convey the moral quality of the person and discuss mental activities during sleep, through dreams, and wakefulness. Here is Li's preface that possibly affected Wu Li's idea of dreams and painting. If a man reflects on all his life from birth through death, he would be aware that it's just a dream, and if others look on his life, they will consider it as painting. People's lives from ancient times to the present are all dreams and paintings, everything from small to great, from one to as many as 100 millions, from the happy to the miserable, from the envious to the lovable, from the taking to the giving, even from the conquering to the abdicating, is nothing but a dream and a painting. A dream leaves no trace, and yet the painting has a trace. However, such a trace is not actual but imaginary. If you speak of dream while being in that dream, and if you comment on a painting after completing the painting, how can you tell when it starts or where it ends? And why is it so unconscious and uncontrollable? At the end of the Ming Dynasty, visionary missionaries were capable to promote sentiments of friendships among troubled Chinese literati. Some were part of the Restoration Society, Fouché, deeply committed to the moral and political reform of the Ming Dynasty. To the regard of Sambiase, the Ming loyalist scholar, scientist, painter, and Buddhist abbot Fang Yiji dedicated a poem to his friend B. Jin Liang, Francesco Sambiase. This is our translation. So I do not know where Master came from. He's tall and slender. He looks like a celestial being, good at talking, even in dialects. His clothing is different from a Buddhist monk. He knows how to calculate tens of thousands of miles. He tries to explain thousands of years of things. I hate this suffering life in the South, hence I got along with him. And I've asked him about the philosophy of heaven. Persevering in giving and receiving respect was a tenet for the Jesuits in China, beginning with Matteo Ricci, to establish sincere friendship and maintain the friendship genuine in times of trouble. Indeed, one had to select friends who were loyal and disinterested, as Confucius or Aristotle taught. This was important on a human level, but also at the level of diplomacy. Monsignor Fan Hao noticed how Father Sambiase is probably the only Western missionary to be mentioned in a Chinese masterpiece of literature, and not as a diplomat, but simply as a friend from afar. In fact, the writer and calligrapher Mao Xian, another member of the Fouché Restoration Society, named Sambiase in a totally lay context. Mao Xian is known for his relationship with Dong Xiaowan, a courtesan who became his concubine. Dong Xiaowan died at the age of 27. Mao Xian's tale, The Memories of the Shadow Plum Hermitage, is a true eulogy for his concubine. In the preface, Mao Xian wrote, "On the last day of the fourth moon, in the year 1642, my concubine, who accompanied me to the foot of Mountain Beigu, insisted on crossing the river and following me to my home. Upon my refusal, she was moved to tears and became more determined than ever in her refusal to depart. Our boat was moored by the bank. At that time, the Western master, B. Jin Liang, Sambiase S.J., had sent me a piece of summer cloth from the West, I suppose a kind of lace, which was thin as a cicada wings. Its color was such pure white to be more alluring than snow. Hence, I made a light dress for her with a pink lining." Here is the portrait of Mao Xian, dating from the Qin dynasty, and I find an interesting correspondence with some lines by Sambiase in the aforementioned Questions on Sleep and Painting. Sambiase wrote, "A longer beard is better, since can behold by the hand. The length of the beard shall be longer than the chin, and almost as long as the length of the hairdo. If one has the beard, but looks not wise, he should shave." I start to wonder here, so I don't know. During the COVID-19 pandemic, tensions among nations are rising, spreading another pandemic of international and social conflicts. Yet Pope Francis is reminding us of the transformative encounter between Francesco d'Assisi and the Sultan Malik al-Kamil. In 1219, Malik was the other as a religious, cultural, and political antagonist of Christendom. Such a miraculous episode of a genuine colloquy beyond borders functions as an analogy for all humans entering real forms of dialogues and even of diplomacy. Historians argue on the occurrence of the event, its details, and on its portrayal. Certainly, Malik al-Kamil did not convert, as Francesco had hoped, but proving himself a fearless witness of Christ. Yet a colloquy took place and challenged both men about the other's creed. And this very notion can challenge us today to restore bonds of friendship. I dare to say that the conversation with, quote, the enemy enhanced Francesco's quest for a fraternity mission of universal significance. Francesco's disciples traveled to Yuan, China, following such a paradigm. In the early rule of the order, 1221, Francesco requested his men not to engage in quarrels when preaching the non-believers and to bear being subjected to host authorities. In compliance with their pursuits of humility and poverty, the miners deployed a strenuous undertaking to interact with the unintelligible alterity of the fierce Tartars and of their wealthy dominions, such as China. Francesco was ready to give his life as the apostles, and he realized how a sincere message of peace could affect all others, including leaders of opposing faiths and cultures. St. Francis faced the other in a state of difference, even of conflict of beliefs, while unfolding the other in a pragmatic discourse about salvation. I was moved by the lines that Pope Francis uses in the Fratres Omnes to describe the world in which San Francesco decided to act. In the world of that time, bristling with watchtowers and defensive walls, cities were a theater of brutal wars between powerful families, even as poverty was spreading through the countryside. Yet there Francis was able to welcome true peace into his heart and free himself of the desire to wield power over others. These words by Pope Bergoglio paint a resemblance with our world and the moment we are living. A moment that forces us to see the finitude of our contemporary experience. We shall find an opening between the finitude of the present and the infinite of history and of the future. We must not give up on the infinite. This infinite shall include a dialectic between different cultures and beliefs, a dialectic that will keep history within itself without uttering the first word, but not even the last. We need the other, the subject of our mission, to present himself to us free, not manipulable. For scholars and students, the dialectic between East and West must be real, need to be real, not rhetorical, not another page in a book to gentrify the topic. Our topic is to find a real hand to shake without manipulating dialogue or history to force anything upon the other. We need a transformation together with those that might listen to our words as we learn from their words to inquire with them in tireless acts of mediation. We need to offer the other the chance for departaking to a reappropriation of the past and of the future, a partaking between an infinite and a finite reread of one in light of the other. Even the engraving depicting Xu Guangxi and Matteo Ricci as friends and brothers in Christ might shine anew beyond 2021 because this friendship existed and such a legacy of solidarity is not exhausted. That is, if we aim at an infinite dialogue between China and Christianity. Franciscan and Dominican friars left Europe to try diplomatic attempts with the Mongols rulers of Asia, including China, fearing the Tatars. Mostly they failed. They found a huge wall. It was also the wall of their expectations. At times they went beyond the wall, not unbiased though, and yet they established a way to overcome their limit. The limit itself is to be understood as the beyond of others. This beyond shall push us to overcome our limits in direction of the other. Stealing from the philosopher Hans Gadamer, I would say that some missionaries and ambassadors felt their own finitude clashing with the limits of the Chinese otherness. Yet men like Giovanni Montecorvino, OFM, understood that his limit directed him towards the other, and the limit was open. It was a starting point, the inaugural beginning of a mission. Pope Nicholas IV, the first Franciscan pontiff, decided to establish stronger diplomatic relations with the Mongol Khans and their Eastern Christian tributary nations, to convert them to Catholicism and to form a common front against Islam. Such projects failed. However, the mission was somehow effective. As you know, responded to Kublai Khan's call for Catholic savants to serve his throne. On 1289, Nicholas IV selected Giovanni da Montecorvino to be his envoy to Cathay. Giovanni was to deliver 27 papal messages on his way to Cathay. Some were penned for the patriarchs of Eastern churches, asking for their unification with Rome. Other letters were written for Kublai Khan and Arghun Khan of Persia, for tributary leaders of the Mongols, and even for the Christian emperor of Ethiopia. As Father Stella of OFM wrote, these facts suggest that Pope Nicholas assigned his confrere Montecorvino with a true universal mission. In his delegation, there was also the Dominican Nicola da Pistoia and the Venetian merchant Pietro di Luca Longo. They traveled to Cathay by sea. They stopped in India for over a year, and Nicola da Pistoia died there. Finally, Giovanni and Pietro de Luca Longo arrived in Cambaluc, Beijing, in 1294. Kublai Khan's grandson, Timur, was religiously tolerant, so he allowed Giovanni to establish the first Catholic churches in Cambaluc. And Giovanni built 2 churches near today Forbidden City. In the second building, located next to the Emperor's Palace, he accommodated 200 believers. There, Montecorvino translated the New Testament and the Psalter in the language of the Tatars, he says, possibly Uyghur. The enculturation books were used first for training about 40 young converts. In fact, Giovanni had liberated and baptized several young slaves. These boys were well instructed in choral singing, so that the performances of the Cambaluc choir
came to be appreciated by the UN Emperor himself. Giovanni was alone during the first 10 years of his mission to staff his parish. Then he had acquired children at the slave market and gave them freedom. Many young boys were on sale, indicating bad economic conditions for Han population. Using the money provided by the UN court, Giovanni found a way to apostolate and alleviate the deep poverty of some families. Montecorvino mentioned how translating liturgical books was a priority for himself and his young pupils. In one of his letters, he described how he embellished the Beijing churches. I have had paintings made of the Old Testament and the New Testament for the instruction of the unlearned, and they are written upon in Latin, Turkic, and Persian letters so that elderly tongues might be able to read. Thus, Giovanni directed local painters, local Chinese painters, to decorate those Beijing shrines with a Biblia Pauperum. As Lorraine Arnold wrote, blessed with funds from the Tomur Emperor, Montecorvino emulated the Franciscan experience any illiterate believer would enjoy in central Italy, Firenze, Assisi, whatever, bringing a simple and effective system of songs and paintings in UN China. While you know of these events, in Italy, few people are familiar with such endeavors. Together with Gian Janin, we started to collect information regarding the characters of this presentation before the pandemic. We were sketching a virtual exhibition to travel between Italy and China. It was a relatively small undertaking to include figures such as the Florentine Jesuit Francesco who built your St. Joseph Church. We were hoping to put together material that would promote the idea of a journey to Italy and China to get acquainted with both the birth and mission places of some pioneers. I confess my joy when entering the Nantan Church of Beijing. The same longing I felt when I had the chance to teach in Xi'an and to visit some sites established centuries ago by Franciscan and Jesuit missionaries within the city and in the province. Indeed, the local Christians nourish the legacy of these forerunners. For them is a lineage of a motherly Chinese Christianity that started with men like Odorico da Pordenone. Several issues altered our attempt. I felt the distance between scholarly pursuits and more bridgeable conversations to face the risk of a planetary opposition between East and West because of the pandemic. We need to overcome stability/immobility and operate as craftsmen. This presentation is then related with the crafting of a book for non-specialist readers. We wish to compare a lineage of exchanges within the grand interpretative theme of Sino-Western relations. To better disseminate the content, the English manuscript will be adapted for Chinese readers in order to dialogue with students and colleagues about missionaries who walk distances to contact and learn from Chinese women and men. Given the complexity of the subject, only a handful of Italians have been selected, namely Giovanni Marignoli, OFM, Francesco Sambiasi, SJ, Vittorio Ricci, OP, Giuseppe Castiglione, SJ, Ferdinando Moggi, SJ, Francesco Folleri, SJ. Their efforts were the result of distinctive, historical, academic, devotional, and social backgrounds. Yet they share the same fervor for contacting the Chinese, even if the ways were often a matter of controversy, as it happened between the mendicant orders and the Society of Jesus. However, their legacy and sufferings might be reactivated to constitute a shared heritage. It is our humble intention to signal how their action for peace materialized when encountering others was a strenuous tenet. Too often they have been regarded as forerunners of colonialism or as lesser missionaries, since they were involved in diplomacy or they were asked to produce secular works of science and art for the Chinese emperors. Pope John Paul II, in the Ut Unum Sint, spoke of the necessity for, quote, a healing of historical memories, a mutual forgiveness, and a firm commitment to strive for communion, end of quote. Pope John was referring then to the new relation with the Orthodox Church, as you know. As mentioned, the first missionaries on the Silk Road were Dominicans and Franciscans. Coming after the Franciscan Giovanni da Pian del Carpine, who arrived in Mongolia with Benedict of Poland, his confrere Giovanni da Montecorvino became the first Archbishop of China in 1312. He was followed by Andrea da Perugia, later Bishop of Guangzhou, and Odorico da Pordenone, both Italian minorites. Let me now explain the lofty title of my presentation. During the summer of 1342, a party of papal diplomats arrived at Cambaluc, guided by the Florentine Franciscan scholar Giovanni Marignoni. He wrote about it circa 1355 in his Chronicum Boiorum, a book for the Holy Roman Emperor Charles IV. Since 1339, Marignoli and his confreres journeyed along the Silk Road, escorted by Italian merchants and UN dignitaries of Alan ethnicity. The Grand Khan Togun Temur, the UN Huizong Emperor, had asked for their mission to Pope Benedict XII Fournier on behalf of Catholic leaders of his army. Those warlords were Alan patricians hoping for spiritual guidance after the death of Giovanni Montecorvino. In 1336, Togun Temur had dispatched emissaries to Avignon, suggesting the Holy See to support a frequent exchange of envoys and to re-establish the pastoral presence of Latin clergy in Cambaluc. Giovanni da Montecorvino, in fact, had converted thousands of Alan families and many thousands other members of the cosmopolitan UN elite, including the Prince of the Tongut, George. Marignoli delivered letters from Pope Benedict and Robert of Anjou, the French King of Naples, Roberto di Anjou, we say in Italian, to Togun Temur. Marignoli also presented the monarch with European war horses he had requested. Those horses came from Napoli, as has been suggested by Giuliano Bertoccioli. The gift of foreign steeds was a conventional tribute to rulers of China. On account of few UN dynasty poems and paintings, we learn that one of the Western mounds was celebrated for its prowess by the Cans literati and compared to auspicious creatures called Tianma, the supernatural celestial horses. On the contrary, the Catholic identity of the papal envoys went unmentioned, court official designating them as dignitaries from Fulan, the kingdom of the Franks, terms describing Occidental Europe. The fine animal was presented to Togun Temur on August 19, 1342, as we learn in the encomium to the celestial horse by the poet calligrapher and historian J.C.S. The introduction of this poem states the extraordinary size of the Tian Ma. And here is the poem. I would simply read one part. The emperor went to receive them in the front courtyard. The ambassador bowed and turning to him said, the tributary state of Fulang, located at the extreme border of Western Ocean and converted to your civilization, it is presenting tribute and therefore entrust himself to your holy omniscience. The emperor kindly consented, appreciating so much sincerity, and welcomed the host into the palace to observe it with complete tranquility. And so the merits were described and painted the appearance. Significantly, J makes the Fulang ambassador say that the Western country was willing to convert to Chinese civilization, trusting on the holy omniscient emperor. The celestial horse from Fulang is included in the life of Genghis Khan, a noteworthy volume published in 1739 by Pierre-Antoine Gobel, French Jesuit astronomer in Beijing. Gobel did not mention the Franciscans or Marignoli, only the French horse. It is interesting to notice the Zhulang scroll, or its Ming Dynasty copy, now in the Forbidden City, depicting the homage of the Tianma to the emperor, was admired centuries later by the Qianlong emperor, as it is demonstrated by the presence of his seal. I wondered then if the mighty Manchu monarch had ever shown the ancient scroll to his most trustworthy foreign acquaintance, the Italian Jesuit Giuseppe Castiglione, who finally painted a comparable scene, the Kazakh envoys offering a tribute of horses to the Qianlong emperor, now in the Guimet Museum in Paris. Marignoli was in Cambaluc till around 1346 as a diplomat and as a bishop. This is the main tower of the Marignoli family, located in Firenze, near the Cathedral of Santa Maria del Fiore. The coat of arms and the tower again, and this is the cathedral. Next, this is the church of Santa Croce, where here Marignoli became a Franciscan. Giovanni Marignoli is the opening character for my book because he guided the major diplomatic train between the papacy and the last UN emperor. Moreover, Chinese historians of Yuan and Ming dynasty do not mention any other embassy from the West, as if the missionary efforts of Giovanni Montecorvino never existed. Albeit, what was the impact of Marignoli's apostolic endeavor in China is hard to tease out from his own meager account on the topic. With the fall of Yuan dynasty and the spreading of the Black Plague pandemic, the Catholic mission was halted and communication between Rome and China stopped for centuries. Francesco Sambiasi, S.J., was born in Cosenza, Calabria, in the south of Italy in 1582. As his brother Giovanni, who died in India, he entered the Society of Jesus in Naples on 1602. He left for China in 1609 with Giulio Aleni. After teaching mathematics in Macau for a year, Sambiasi served in the most relevant Chinese cities, including Beijing, Nanjing, Jiading, Hangzhou, Kaifeng, and Guangzhou, entering in contact with Paolo Shu, Ignazio Sun, and Yang Tinyun. As in Nanjing, in work for the Astronomical Observatory in 1639 or in 1645, I prefer this interpretation, he presented to a Chinese emperor, either Chongzhen or Hongwan, I would say, this innovative map of the world. This is the Ghent version. Between 1646 and 1649, Sambiase served as an ambassador for the last southern Ming emperors, Hongguang, Longhu, and Yonli, as they were fighting the Qing invasion. He oversaw diplomatic activities with Macau to petition the Portuguese for military aid against the Manchu. The Longhu emperor gave Sambiase a special decree for praising Christianity and allow him to build a new church in Guangzhou. When the Qing army attacked Guangzhou in 1647, Sambiase was injured during the fighting. He died in 1649 and was buried outside Guangzhou on land donated to the Jesuits by the Yonli emperor. Sambiase was then active as a diplomat for 3 Nanmin emperors, and he had been sent to Macau as imperial ambassador 3 times, 44, 45, and 46. In a letter of December 1629 to the provincial, the visitor André Palmeiro complained about Sambiase's excessive political attitudes, criticizing his accommodating stance towards the Chinese way of life. This is in the RC documents. It is significant to underline that the Longhu emperor was probably a close friend of Sambiase. Father Francesco had helped him when he was imprisoned by the Chongzhen emperor between 1636 and 44, as it is stated in a document only published in Chinese that I am translating with the help of my wife. The Dominican prefect apostolic Vittorio Giovan Battista Ricci was baptized in Firenze as Francesco Ricci in 1621, 400 years ago. This is the convent of San Domenico in Fiesole, where he entered in 1632 and took the vows. Vittorio Ricci, who lived an adventurous life in the Far East, was among the first protagonists of the rights controversy, condemning the Jesuits in China. He arrived in the Philippines in 1648. Assigned to China to prepare himself, he began his ministry in the parish of the Holy Kings of Parian, the Chinese quarters of Manila, where he studied the southern dialect of Xiamen and wrote a catechism in Chinese. After 1655, Ricci was examined in Fukien, where he met the pirate and Ming loyalist leader Zhen Zhenggong, Koxinga, in European sources. Under his protection, in August 1655, Ricci opened the first church in the city, caring for abandoned plague children and 155 Indian slaves, Catholics who fled Macau and were in the service of Koxinga. Zheng resisted Qing conquest of China and established himself as the ruler of Taiwan, fighting with the Dutch. In that troubled context, Ricci guided several diplomatic missions in China, Taiwan, and the Philippines. Due to his linguistic and diplomatic skills, he attempted to establish peace between the Dutch, Koxinga's family, and Spanish authorities in the Philippines. Ricci converted many Taiwan natives, and he also tried to protect the Chinese community of Manila from Spanish and local anti-Chinese sentiment. For his role as ambassador of Koxinga and intermediary with the Dutch, he was subject of investigation by the Consejo de Indias between 1666 and 1677. But the Manilensi religious authorities defended his name, and the Consejo canceled a recall order to Spain. Ricci spent the rest of his life in around Manila, where he died in Parian on February 17, 1685. Some of the characters of my presentation were not ambassadors. They operated as mediators, serving the Chinese emperors in matter of culture not connected with the apostolate. I am talking about the three Jesuit brothers, Castiglione, Follery, and Ferdinando Moggi. Castiglione was a painter as an architect for three emperors, and Moggi built St. Joseph of Beijing and worked shoulders to shoulders with the Jesuit astronomers, as you see here. Sources tell us that Moggi and Follery entered the Chinese mission in 1721. Karel Slavicek, Jesuit astronomer, cartographer, and musician, listed the Jesuit brothers posted at the Nantan College in Beijing in a letter of November 1725. He included Ferdinando Moggi as an expert of bronze and Francesco Follery, quote, who came to China as a military architect and is the vice rector of this residence, end of quote. Brother Follery left Beijing in 1728 for reason of health. In 1733, he was surely living in Macau. By 1746, he designed the church dedicated to St. Joseph, as one could read on site over the bronze plate discovered in 1999 near the altar. It is therefore possible that Moggi and Follery develop a similar expertise in working with metals and artillery or military architecture. The employment of Jesuits by Qing monarchs for tasks such as those of warfare was not rare. Sambiase had to do that. Ferdinand Ferbist, S.J., Flemish mathematician, astronomer, undertook many projects for the Kanchi emperor. Those included the casting of about 450 cannons. Later, tired of Pope Clement's XI attitude against Confucian rituals among Chinese converts, in 1721, Kanchi banned Christian missions in China. The Ang monarch stated, I have concluded that the Westerners are petty indeed. It is impossible to reason with them because they do not understand larger issues as we understand them in China. There is no a single Westerner versed in Chinese words, and their remarks are often incredible and ridiculous. To judge from this proclamation, their religion is no different from other small, bigoted sects of Buddhism or Taoism. I've never seen a document which contains so much nonsense. From now on, Westerners should not be allowed to preach in China to avoid further trouble, end of quote. Consequently, missionaries were perceived as ignorant and meddlesome and banned from all the Chinese provinces, the city of Canton excluded. They were spared only those working for the Beijing court. The tension between the Vatican and Kanchi is evident in a letter by Francesco Follery, written November 6, 1722, to General Michelangelo Tamburini in Rome. Follery stated that how in 1722 missionaries, quote, were all summoned to the palace of the villa of the emperor, where the emperor will determine those who were to leave his court, since the same emperor said the Europeans were too many, end of quote. Few weeks later, December 20, the old emperor Kanchi died. I have identified the villa mentioned by Brother Francesco Follery with the Garden of Joyful Spring. Kanchi loved that cool side located at the foot of the Western Hills, and he often used it for courtly matters. One of those was the visit of a Russian embassy to China, led by General Lev Vasilievich Ismailov. whom had been received at the Garden of Joyful Spring in 1720, as described by his physician, John Bell. Among those who were to translate, we find some Jesuits and the famous Italian priest Matteo Ripa. In 1724, the Yonzhen emperor proscribed the sect of the Heavenly Lord, yet he continued to use missionaries as mathematicians, astronomers, geographers, experts in artillery, clockmakers, artists, and musicians. Few distant members of the imperial lineage converted to Catholicism, as did Aijinjoro Sunu and his heirs, among which we find some adversaries of Yonzhen. One of Sunu's sons, Aijinjoro Shuergen, baptized as Paul, was among Giuseppe Castiglione's early patrons, ordering him at least 3 oil paintings, all lost, depicting a Trinity, a Madonna, and a Saint Joseph for his Beijing residence. Another letter by Francesco Folleri, dated November 1726, expressed his fear of Yonzhen. Quote, "The great danger for this mission is to completely ruin, since this emperor is an enemy of the Christian religion." End of quote. Folleri was informing of the ways of the unpredictable Yonzhen, who, quote, "destroyed many of the most prominent families by raising them to the first dignities of the empire, and then with apparent force stripping them of all their possessions, and some of them even of their life. That is why we all share fear and terror for this emperor, for the changes that continuously happen from the dignity to the chains." Judging by the chronology of the letter, I suggest that Folleri had in mind the case of Aijinjoro Yuanzhen, the 8th son of Kanshi. Another document connects once again Ferdinando Moggi, Francesco Folleri, and Giuseppe Castiglione with the rights controversy. We find their signatures together with Francis Staldin S.J., Giuseppe da Costa S.J., and the Vincentian musician Teodorico Pedrini in a Portuguese oath of obedience to Pope Innocenzo XIII, dated October 22, 1724. The situation of the sect of the Heavenly Lord did not improve with the Qianlong Emperor. However, the ingenious Castiglione, forced as he was to operate outside the boundaries of the evangelization as Lanchenin, remained in good terms with the ruler for more than 30 years. Veritably, their friendship started in the young prince's interest in Western paintings. The germane investment the Jesuits made on Castiglione's friendship with Qianlong is evoked in a letter by Ferdinand Augustin von Allenstein, dated October 10, 1741. The Jesuit astronomer, mathematician, and representative of Qianlong to the King of Portugal, greatly admired Castiglione. He wrote, "We hope that the grace that this humble artist and brother founds in the eyes of the emperor will favorably influence the general position of all our Christian affairs. Perhaps precisely this hope could prompt European artists, especially those from our society, with their painting, which is now almost the only cause of popularity at the Chinese court, to serve God's churches and help Castiglione, who is already somehow exhausted." Let us finish with some significant words by Francesco Sambiasi, again from the Questions of Sleep and Painting. Quote, "Eyes are the windows of the soul, and the eyelids are the doors that protect this window. Eyes should be employed to watch only that which is good." So this is the finishing remark. Eyes should be employed to watch only that which is good and desirable, since they are not placed at the back, but at the front of our body, eyes should look ahead towards a path we have not yet walked. Human beings should not be satisfied with the good endeavors they have already fulfilled, because they ought to always go ahead. When his eyesight is defective, the human being cannot do anything good, and this means that he is useless. Thank you very much for your patience.